Hi, welcome to the program Leadership Perspectives, a forum, a platform where we discuss all things related to leadership. I'm your host Manik. Let's look at some of the emerging trends of leadership, or we need to upskill to redefine what is to lead corporates today. And to discuss that, we have a very eminent personality with me, who's a very good friend of mine, and a working colleague, as well as whom I have looked up to as a leader. He's the current chairman, CEO of Global Strategy and Corporate Sustainability, and also he's formerly the CEO and the first CEO of Sri Lanka Institute of Nanotechnology, and also the program director and executive in residence for INSEAD Business School. And also he's currently board members of Aitken Spence Plantation as well as LOLC Group. And also have provided leadership at highest level to several multinationals including Sterling Winthrop, Wicked Benkisa, Unilever, Mass Holding, GSK. He's Dr. Ravi Fernando. Thank you very much and welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Manik, and looking forward to these few minutes with you.
Right. Dr. Ravi, is it possible, first of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing extremely well, and as you know, like you, I also have a very disciplined fitness regime.
Okay.
And I try to get 6 kilometers a day somehow.
How is that working out?
Working out very well, and I think a healthy mind and a healthy body need to go together.
Excellent, excellent. Just to put everything into context, we'll be discussing exclusively somewhat a new concept called sustainable leadership. Although it is new, it is very relevant as well as very current and very significant to managing corporates today. Just to start off, just to put at ease the context to discussing the sustainability proposition, the clock is ticking. You find that some of the brilliant minds of the world every year, they meet up, the so-called climate change watchdogs, in these so-called gatherings of United Nations Climate Change Cooperation, we call COP26, which recently held. I think they have been meeting for the last 26 years. Now, it's very interesting, but I think if you at the outset, the noise being created, the urgency being established, so there's absolute urgency that is coming out from those gatherings. But however, we find that it's beyond than just a gathering of people just to share the updates on the temperature levels.
Yes.
Right? It's a beyond just to come up with some cool words. We heard recently code red. Right? No doubt it will create that urgency. And my biggest worry is that whether there is any tangible results, because I see there's a constant shifting of the goalpost.
Very true.
Right? For example, you're talking about initially the 1.2 increase in global temperatures in the recorded history of 1880, and now we are settling for 1.5, and then we are looking at 3.7, and then the global carbon control targets were 50% initially set for 2030, and now it's shifting to 2050. Dr. Ravi, the messages and the signals that are coming out to the business community is not great. They are saying license to procrastinate.
Absolutely.
What's your take on that?
I think you've absolutely hit the nail on the head on this, Manik. What I have seen from following this subject very closely from about 2000, when I really engaged in studying the subject at Cambridge, is an unprecedented amount of procrastination. Leaders globally, national leaders, business leaders, have all been kicking the can down the road. So actually we started talking about this subject as far back as 1987, when there was a UN Commission report called the Brundtland Report, where it clearly said global warming is happening, extreme weather as a result of that is happening, and the only way to stop this is by exiting fossil fuels. From 1987 to 2021, 34 years have gone, and we are actually burning more fossil fuels than we did in our history. We have gone from burning about 21 gigatons of fossil fuels to now 33.4 gigatons of fossil fuels. So, in a 34-year period, world leaders and business leaders, as opposed to engaging with the topic, as opposed to doing some action about the topic, all they have done is been extremely selfish about their own economic growth, and they have been ready to compromise the planet to achieve their economic growth at any cost. And I think that is the reality we are facing with in terms of the code red for humanity. And it was the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres who at the UN General Assembly this September said the world is facing a code red for humanity, and unless we now commit to exiting fossil fuels, we are going to face the brunt of this increased temperatures. Like you just mentioned, it was keep temperatures below 1.5 degrees centigrade for the last 34 years, and suddenly now we are already talking about it going to get into 1.5 in the next
and
3 to
discussed, which some seems to be okay with that.
yeah, which is going to happen in the next 3 to 4 years.
Right.
And world leaders have, like you said, kicked the can down the road, and now they are confronted with a probable increase of 2.2 degrees plus 2.2 degrees in the next 3 to 4 years by 2025, 26, where we are going to face a catastrophic rise in sea levels due to the melting of the ice caps, and that in turn is going to devastate global economies to the tune of $54 trillion to $67 trillion when we cross the 1.5 degrees mark. And that is nearly 70% of the global economy. Now, if that doesn't send a signal to world leaders and want them to respond with urgency, I honestly have no idea what is going to
Absolutely.
do this.
Yeah.
So, I think we have a global leadership at the moment, which are national leaders and business leaders, who either have ignored the science completely or have decided they are not going to spend any time thinking about the science because they have decided it's more convenient not to think about the science. So, I think in a simple line, I would say the issue we are facing today in leadership is a lack of appreciation of the science and being able to say we don't need science as we lead our businesses and nations.
Excellent, excellent. You already touched upon certain aspect. My next question as well, as you quite rightly pointed out, we need to appreciate the science. We really cannot ignore the science. I need to build those science into the business models as well.
Absolutely.
Right. So I think you find that some of those, apart from being understanding the whole proposition of what you can gain out of the sustainable mindset, also the social conscious, you find that there are cropping up certain leaders who are really taking the charge in terms of providing leadership for sustainability. People like Jasper Broding of IKEA, or we say people like Gene Tikeri of Schneider Electrics, or even Elon Musk, even Levers, Palmer, right? So all these guys are leading the charge. Now, the question is still, sustainability needs scale. We need a lot of players given the timelines to get on board, and that's not really happening. So my question is, I think there are at the outset there are misconceptions when it comes to sustainable leadership. They think that okay, we take on going on this, looking at reducing your carbon footprint is a trade-off. It's not a trade-off.
It's a survival.
If you go and if you get into that sustainable mode, is actually you can reduce premium prices, economies of scale. Is
Massive
right?
business opportunity.
Can you just elaborate, Dr. Ravi, on it's not a trade-off, but basically you can really look at exponential profit.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think, Manik, one needs to understand the psyche of leaders today, business leaders and national leaders.
Right.
And if they have never been schooled or educated on this in the standard curriculums of MBA programs and governance programs and board leadership. The conventional education system has never ever educated leaders on the need to be sensitive to the science and to build science-led strategies for corporate strategies and national strategies. So in the absence of that, what we are now seeing are majority of the world leaders who are in positions of leadership at national level or at business level have actually no reference to this science-led leadership.
Right.
And in the absence of that, they are continuing with business as usual.
Right.
So I am a strong advocate that you can both win in science and also save the planet and also have extremely unique businesses.
Right.
So I'll give you 3 or 4 very quick examples. Today the most profitable and the most recognized automobile company in the world is Tesla. Their market cap is bigger than the combined market caps of BMW, Toyota, Volkswagen, Benz, all combined. And Elon Musk, since he launched Tesla probably 15-20 years ago, is now the richest man on the planet. So he's created a sustainable solution to automobiles and to transportation.
And created amazing individual wealth as well.
Individual wealth, and created a market cap that is unprecedented in the history of automobiles. Give you another example. Google's Pichai, Sundar Pichai. He has a program called 24/7 where they want to be 24/7 carbon neutral, carbon positive. And he is 100% driven by renewable energy for the last 5 years. Right. Now, why Google and Alphabet is probably the biggest company on the planet today. Yvon Chouinard of Patagonia. Patagonia for the last 40 years is probably a 21st century company because they have understood that there is no such thing as profit at any cost. There has to be profit at a responsible way of doing business. So these are just 3 examples of world leaders in business who have done the right thing and who have succeeded dramatically in their businesses. And not only that, they have also created amazing amount of wealth and profitability.
Right. So it's safe to say that they are not really asking the right questions in terms of what the market would look like in a net zero world, or maybe what sort of business model I need to change and adapt to the demands of. So at the boardroom level, there are things that are not happening. That's what you're saying.
I'm saying that, and this is not a criticism of any leader.
Yeah.
This is the reality check. The reality check that I'm basically expounding is that today's business leaders and today's world leaders, unfortunately, in all the MBA programs that they have ever been to, have never ever been educated on the subject of climate emergency, etc. As a result, they don't see the need to engage with it. So I am not saying that one can substitute any of those courses. I think every one of those courses have a role to play in forming and educating business leaders and national leaders. However, I think today's world leaders in business or in nations or in anything for that matter have to supplement that gap of knowledge with a understanding of what the reality of the world is facing is and what this code red for humanity is, because the code red for humanity translates to a code red for business.
Absolutely.
So if there is no such thing as business,
it's integrated so much.
It is totally integrated. So I think it is now imperative upon every national leader or business leader to self-educate themselves and spend some time and energy understanding the reality of the code red for humanity, and then creating business strategies and corporate strategies and national strategies that totally embed the subject into their corporate strategies, where it can be a win for the planet and a win for humanity and a win for business. And I've given you 3 examples of 3 of the world's most important companies who have done that and taken their businesses to a place that is unheard of.
So this is what you refer to as the strategic differentiation.
Absolutely. This is, I would even go to the extent of, because you're focusing on leadership, I would even go to the extent of saying that is what 21st century leadership is all about.
Absolutely.
The word 21st century leadership is something that was coined by Yuval Harari.
Yeah.
I mean, he didn't call it leadership, but he called it 21st century challenges.
He's one of my favorite authors,
Sapiens
Yeah.
and Homo Deus.
Yeah.
So, 21st century, he wrote a book called 21 Lessons for the 21st Century.
Right.
And this book was published in 2018.
Right.
And thanks to COVID, I had a chance of reading that book
Okay.
cover to cover
Right.
between the first 3 months of the lockdown.
Right.
And as I read that book, one thing that came very clearly to me was that single book captured the essence of what every 21st century leader must now be conversant with, must be fully tuned into, and must be responding to.
Too significant to ignore.
Too significant to ignore. And I just asked a simple question to myself. So who is teaching the 21 lessons for the 21st century to business leaders? Who is teaching the 21 lessons to national leaders? And that led me to create what we now have globally as a 21st century board leadership masterclass, which we launched in September in Luxembourg.
Right.
And now it has been extended to Ireland and to England. And we've also have one session in Sri Lanka, and it's going to very soon expand into India and to Vietnam and also to Turkey and Switzerland. So what we say is you need to supplement whatever knowledge you have acquired through your MBA programs or whatever courses, and supplement that with an understanding of the 21st century board leadership model or strategy leadership model, and then you'll be a 21st century ready leader, a complete leader. And the other important point is that I think it is imperative any leader in the world,
Right.
national or business or organization, whatever organization, spends time every day to sharpen their skills and sharpen their saw, because there's no such thing as now I have come to that place of know-it-all.
My next question, Dr. Ravi, is linked to that exactly.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the S&Ps or the Fortune 500, out of the 500, I think 300 plus companies are already on board on this in their own small way, getting the sustainability mode. Now, some of you, actually, you have presenting quarterly greenhouse gas
Emissions.
inventories as well, and also producing, having inbuilt renewable energy procurement targets, right? So they're really walking the talk. Now we have this concept of CS. Now, if you look at the CSR, corporate social responsibility, I'm sure you have worked in so many multinationals. It's about the purpose, let's be honest. It's mostly about to, probably just to show good governance or have a dedicated page in your corporate report showing that, right, I'm doing something for the planet, blah, 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 put some photographs, some narratives. They will have their own business model and they will ask the question to the other people, okay, what are we going to put about CSR? It's not two different strategies, is it? It has to be congruent, synergy, one objective built into the society, to the structure, am I right?
Absolutely. So you have now opened a can of worms, because when I was studying the subject at Cambridge and going back to 2006-07, we actually conducted a funeral for the term CSR.
Okay.
The entire batch, we actually painted the coffin and wrote the term CSR, and the 100-odd guys who were on the course, we buried it because we know 99.9% of companies use CSR as a means of doing good to look good.
Okay.
And there's absolutely nothing more than, like you said, a PR exercise. So any company that is yet using the term CSR, to me, immediately sends a message
Wrong signals.
that they have not even understood the word sustainability and triple bottom line. So I think CSR is dead. CSR has no place in corporate strategy. I think the future is about embedding 21st century leadership strategy into your corporate strategy, which is way beyond CSR,
Right.
and looking at subjects looking at challenges and issues that stem from Yuval Harari's 21 lessons. And one of the things we've done is created what I would like to call a 21st century strategy leadership model, which has 6 elements in the model. And from a company that just simply does a bit of CSR on the side, and does what I would like to term in broad sense greenwashing to make them all look good. The 21st century leader understands that you need to embed a strategy model that is different.
Right.
So the strategy model we teach have 6 elements in it, which stem from the book. So the 6 elements of the module are,
This is my next question on the model. I'm going to touch on that on my next question, but on the imperatives, the 7 imperatives. So let's get on to that in a while. So I fully agree with that. That the transition from the CSR it's done and dusted. It's not.
It's history.
It's history.
It's buried.
It's buried. Okay, as you said. Getting back to my next question, Dr. Ravi, is as you quite rightly earlier pointed out, Google, Alphabet, Sergey Brin and Larry Page, all these guys are really running the sustainability concept. In fact, as you said, they have become carbon neutral way back in 2007, and now
even
2017, I think they are now fully 100%
renewable energy.
Renewable energy.
Absolutely.
Right, and companies like Next Extra Energy, which is the world's largest generator of renewable energy, is also through wind and solar is really creating that waves. Now, my question here is that we need to get more players onto the starting lineup, right? And to get the needle moving, the individual mindset is not just enough. You need to look at a policy level, at corporate level, state level. For example, the Green Deal, United Nations, they are looking at the first. European Union. The first carbon neutral continent, or we call it the bloc, by 2050. So, do you see there has to be certain amount of enforcement, either through carbon taxes or regulatory wise, because the warnings are there. You have quite rightly quantified 54 million, and if that doesn't be a warning sign, I don't know what it is. So what is lacking to get more? Because we don't have the luxury of time, because we need more players to get on board this journey. So how do you see the government's role in facilitating such efforts?
Okay, so I am a strong believer that national leaders and business leaders in the 21st century, if they want to be considered 21st century leaders, need to have 4 traits, which I would call 21st century leadership traits. If you don't have those 4 traits, I would go to the extent of saying you're basically a 19th century, science denying, climate emergency denying leader who is basically taking the planet and the company and the country on a collision course, and basically you're going to create a code red for humanity and ruin your country, ruin your company and ruin the planet, all at the same time.
And signs are already there.
Signs are already there.
PW is extreme weather events.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let me first paint a picture of how serious the situation is, because I think sometimes people tend to brush off isolated incidents as opposed to seeing a continuum of incidents. So what we now have today is what we call a code red for humanity, where the last 21 years since the year 2000 were the hottest 21 years ever recorded on the planet's history of 3 to 4 million years of recording temperatures. So number one, we are in the 21 hottest years the planet has ever experienced. Number two,
so it's an upward trend.
Yeah, it's a massive upward trend and 21 years unbroken. Number two, as a result, what is the reason for this? This is because we have burned more fossil fuels than ever before. From 21 gigatons of fossil fuel carbon dioxide, it's now 33.4 gigatons of fossil fuel. And as we keep burning more and more fossil fuels, it gets trapped in the Earth's atmosphere and the planet heats. So when you have extreme heat in the planet, we now talk about 3 kinds of extreme weather incidents pummeling the planet every day. So what are these incidents? Number one, temperatures are going off the roof. I mean, we have seen California record 56 degrees centigrade. We have seen forest fires happening all over the place. As the planet keeps heating up, these forest fires will increase. Australia had unprecedented forest fires. So, number one, planet is heating up.
So we are heading towards the inevitable, if actions are not taken, I would like to call planet barbecue.
I think that might be probably the one term the Australians will understand. Because they are into barbecues.
Yes.
But the second thing is, so you now have extreme weather incidents in the form of temperature rise, in the form of drought, because as temperatures rise, you're also going to have more droughts because the water is getting pummeled out of the system. Thirdly, you have flooding and massive catastrophic typhoons and tsunamis and all of that. So those kind of incidents are 80% of extreme weather incidents. And extreme weather incidents in the 70s was about 11 to 12 incidents per annum.
Wow.
And it was about $12 billion worth of damage to the economy. Now fast forward to the 20s. Now we are talking of anything between 600 to 700 incidents per annum from 11 incidents, and the damage to the planet is now between 400 to 500 billion dollars per annum. So if anyone says there are no extreme weather incidents happening, all they need to do is watch the weather channel on news.
Or probably shut off the AC and just sit there in the offices and see
what it is like. Okay. So that is the reality we are facing. So how does that translate into a problem for nations?
Right.
As you look at being a national leader, you should ask the question, so what is causing this global warming? What can I do in my country to make sure that doesn't happen? So number one is exit fossil fuels, because exiting fossil fuels is the beginning of trying to have a strategy to fight the climate emergency.
Right.
That means they need to be moving towards renewable energy as an energy source in their country.
So Ravi, sorry to interrupt here. I mean, that's on paper is great, but if you look at the recent COP26, right, you found the big players of energy, the BP, the Chevrons, the Saudi Aramco coming and changing the agenda.
Correct.
Right. So at the highest level, there is corporate politics that are happening, right? And I mean, they can't change their core product, which is fossil based. But what happens is the ancillary industry, financial industries, which are committed to long-term fossil-based projects. So, don't you? Is that we know what it is, but at how we really look at the dominance of these major big-time energy players.
So.
The shots.
So here we go. So I'm going to name and shame all the countries and the companies and
That's what we are.
Businesses that are part of creating the code red for humanity,
right,
and who are actually
not part of the solution.
Not part of the solution, who are absolutely part of the problem.
Okay.
So COP26 is what I would term, from 1996 to 2021, we've had 26 COP meetings. And these COP meetings were supposed to be agendas to reduce carbon emissions, but they have absolutely achieved nothing. So I would go to the extent of saying the 26 COP meetings have been a COP out, and they have not achieved anything compared to what they had to achieve.
Okay.
And who is responsible for that? So there are 9 nations in the world whose economies are driven by fossil fuels, who were the first countries to stop any progress on exiting fossil fuels. So starting from Saudi Arabia to China to India to Russia to Mexico to Australia to Indonesia, these countries and Brazil, these 9 countries absolutely started blocking the COP agenda and have blocked the COP agenda at every given opportunity. So at this COP meeting, COP26, China didn't attend, Russia didn't even attend the meeting. And you saw that Brazil didn't attend either.
Right.
So these are the nations that are actually creating the code red for humanity by not respecting the science. Number 2 are the companies which have then driven the COP agenda And one thing unique about COP26 in Glasgow was the biggest single delegation to attend Glasgow were lobbyists for the fossil fuel companies.
Oh, right.
There were more people at COP26 who were lobbying against renewable energy moving forward and exiting than the country delegations of any country that attended COP26. And my question is, how did the UN allow that to happen? Because they were not coming to move forward, they were coming to hold us back. So which companies are sponsoring these lobbies? ExxonMobil, Chevron, BP, Shell, Standard Oil, the Saudi Aramco. These are the companies behind the blockage of moving forward. Then who is funding this? The top 10 banks that are funding fossil fuel projects. And after committing in 2015 in Paris to stopping funding fossil fuel projects, between 2015 and 2021, in the 6 years, these banks that I'm going to mention now have spent nearly $3 trillion sponsoring fossil fuel projects, even though they committed to stopping it. So who are these banks? JP Morgan, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, Barclays Bank, Standard Chartered, HSBC, Deutsche Bank, Mitsubishi Bank, Sumitomo Bank, the Royal Bank of Canada. So what I have given you now is a very quick analysis of why it has taken 26 COP meetings and we have achieved nothing, because they have all basically denied the science.
Right.
And they have decided profit before planet, profit before people is going to be their agenda. And what was hilarious about COP26 for me was countries were committing to exiting fossil fuels in 2050, 2060, and actually India said we'll exit in 2070. Now, the recent World Meteorological Report that has been published this week, and the IPCC report, which is the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, these reports say that we are going to be crossing the plus 1.5 degree barrier between 2025 and 2030 and 2040.
Right.
So the commitments are starting at 2050 to get out of fossil fuels.
Right.
When the proverbial shit hits the fan is about to happen in the next 5 years.
Next 5 years.
So basically we are now sitting on a time bomb, and if any business leader thinks that their business is going to survive extreme weather incidents and their supply chains are going to survive extreme weather incidents, are living on another planet.
Right.
Because no supply chain on the planet is going to be protected from extreme weather incidents.
Right.
So if you have a business model which needs a supply chain, and every business has a supply chain, I can tell you, if you don't have a 21st century strategy there, you are not going to have a supply of anything to do anything. Nations who think that they are going to survive extreme weather incidents by pursuing let's wait for 2070, 2050 to get out of fossil fuels, I'm telling you, we are going to have a devastated planet where nearly 54 to 67 trillion dollars of the global economy, which is 90 trillion. So you are going to destroy 60 to 70% of that economy. There is no business in a devastated planet.
And once you reach this point of no return, it's about playing catch up, and it's not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. So we are talking of massive devastation staring at our eyes. The UN Secretary General has understood and called it a code red for humanity, which is what I would call the ultimate word used for the word emergency.
Right.
Now, what is hilarious about the world leaders of these companies I just mentioned and countries is they have not understood emergency 101.
Right.
So what is emergency? If somebody is in the ICU room in a hospital or the emergency room in the hospital, and the doctors and the nurses say, we'll come in 5 years' time and save this patient, is that treating an emergency like with urgency? No. It is basically not understanding the term emergency.
Is it probably because of the mass scale and someone else is picking up the bill? and you don't feel it immediately. Just it's a mass scale thing, right? Okay, let's wait and see. Why do I want to be left behind? Nobody else is doing so. Let's focus on the profit. It can be elements of that as well.
So there, I would put it down to two things. Number one, majority of business leaders who are running businesses today, majority of national leaders running nations today, have been schooled on what I would call a shareholder value creation mindset. And for them, creating shareholder value and profitability at any cost is all that matters.
Yeah.
Now, they have not been even sensitized to the term climate emergency or code red for humanity. So they are operating from a knowledge base that was relevant in the 60s and the 70s. And they have not evolved to be 21st century leaders. They are basically 19th century science denying leaders.
Right.
And this is, I would say, the reason that world leaders are yet looking at short-term profits, short-term GDP growth, short-term quarterly results, as opposed to understanding that we can end up with those short-term results, but we have completely mortgaged the future of the planet.
Okay. Getting back to a question from a leadership point of view, your baby, your bread and butter, is the Century Board leadership model. Now, first I must congratulate you as a Sri Lankan to come up with the coin the term strategic corporate sustainability. I think you own that. I think that's amazing. That's so relevant, and I think we are so proud of that. Probably will not have the luxury of really going into detail, but your boardroom leadership model talks about 7 imperatives.
6
Okay,
6 modules.
6 imperatives in terms of geopolitics, economic, technology, climate, health, social, and of course advisory and governance as well. So, and that is based on what you're trying to
instill
based on driving the agenda for the triple bottom line. So it's linked to that as well. My question is, Dr. Ravi, is that how do you really, now that is so much on the plate for a conventional leader, a CEO. How do you see those competency, those trigger or parameters? Can you bring it down to a JD, a job description level, or inbuilt into a KPI, so that the modern resume, or not a resume, the KPIs of a leader, it's different to years back. That you have inbuilt these sustainable triggers into parameters into that.
Excellent. So I think let me quickly explain the model first. So we created what is now known as the 21st century leadership strategy model, or the 21st century board leadership model. In this model, there are 6 elements. There are 3 emergencies at the top, and there are 3 disruptors at the bottom. So let's start with the emergencies. And then I'll tell you how this can be linked into a KPI. The 3 emergencies that every national leader and every business leader are going to be facing today, tomorrow, and in the coming 50 to 100 years are: number one, the climate emergency is upon us.
Right.
And the climate emergency, I have already explained, is about global warming and the devastation of supply chains as we see that.
Right.
So every business leader needs to understand the subject of climate emergency and have a strategy within the company, so that that company becomes part of the solution to the climate emergency and not continues to be happily on the sidelines saying we will be part of the problem.
Right.
Number 2 subject is the health and social emergency. Now, we saw COVID-19 shut down the whole world for nearly 2 years.
Yeah.
Now, is that the end of health emergencies? No. I think that's the beginning of health emergencies. So basically, deforestation leads to health emergencies.
Right.
And when these bats and whatever get caught up in the wet markets of the Asia Pacific, mostly Asian, wet markets in China, Vietnam, Wuhan, Malaysia, Indonesia, then viruses start spreading from animals to human beings.
Through consumption.
Because you're culling these animals and the blood comes into contact with human beings. So we are going to see more of this, not less of this. And health emergencies. Today we have countries like India and even China and a good part of even the developed world, where air pollution is so bad that people, now we have about 7 million people dying of air pollution. Then you have plastic pollution, you have ocean pollution, and these health and social emergencies create only one thing: a destabilization of the social order.
Right.
And when people obviously fall ill, they are going to be out of jobs, which means no income.
Right.
Now you have the tourist industry, which is the biggest industry on the planet,
Right.
which is completely come to a standstill. Now when you have a standstill in a sector like that, so many people in the country, in the world, are no longer having income.
Yeah.
So the health and social emergency is the second one. The combination of economic, of the health emergency and the climate emergency leads to an economic emergency.
Right.
Economic emergencies don't happen on their own.
Right.
They happen when you ignore the other two.
Okay.
So these are the three emergencies every 21st century leader must be cognizant about, must be sensitive about, and must have a response strategy to become part of the solution in their corporate strategy.
Right.
Now we have three disruptors. What are these disruptors? Every company on the planet is getting disrupted by technology.
Right.
And like you mentioned at the beginning, I had the honor of leading Slintech, the Nanotechnology Institute of Sri Lanka. And at that time, my vision was, how can Sri Lanka become a global player in nanotechnology?
Right.
And I wanted Sri Lanka to be the first country in the world that had sustainable nanotechnology solutions. And I'm proud to say, within 3 years of leading that, we already had 5 US patents, which we registered in the US Patent Office in 2008. By 2010, we had got all these patents in office. But here I am in 2021, and I can tell none of those patents have been commercialized. So nanotechnology, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, robotics, precision agriculture, very important. You know, precision agriculture is the only way forward, I believe, because as extreme weather incidents pummel rain-fed agriculture, if you don't have precision agriculture, I'm telling you, the world is going to be facing a catastrophic shortage of food.
So you think you can quantify all that to get today's leadership?
To have targets? Absolutely, absolutely. So let me wind this up by saying technology disruption is going to happen.
Yeah.
Second one is geopolitical disruption. And we need to understand that there are 3 geopolitical players in the world today. China is ascending to become the most important geopolitical player on the planet. One Belt, One Road. They now have amazing strategy for economic growth and influence in 138 countries. Russia is continuing to influence the northern part of Europe. Even as we speak, they've got 140,000 troops in Ukraine,
right,
and putting pressure on the European Union. And the third player is USA, which is now becoming marginalized and confined to influencing the US,
right,
because of its inward-looking leadership that has been there. Now we have a 21st century leader, but he's yet trying to undo the damage. So these 3 players are going to constantly impact every nation, every business,
right,
and we need to understand that. Lastly, we have what is known as governance compromise,
right,
governance disruption. So when banks
right,
end up putting trillions of dollars to fund fossil fuel projects, what are they basically saying? They are saying we are putting profit before planet.
right,
So to me, that's a governance disruption.
right.
So there is so much of governance disruption happening. So these are the 6 modules.
Okay.
Now, how can we turn this into KPIs for business leaders?
Yeah.
I think first we need to educate all business leaders and national leaders. This is the reality, and for them to come out of the cave of ignoring science.
So there's an intelligence gap that you need to fill first.
Absolutely. An intelligence gap that needs to be scaled up very dramatically in a very short period, and that's what we try to do in the 21st century board leadership model masterclass. Number 2, we developed a strategy template for every company who does the course, for every one of the modules to set new KPIs that then they can work with,
right,
and they can measure themselves. And one of the criteria we have set up in the 21st century board leadership model strategy template is no targets should be after 2025.
Okay.
So if anyone wants to be doing a 21st century leadership masterclass,
Doesn't call for sense of urgency also.
yeah, because it's no point people talking about 2070 when their grandchildren have also died
Yeah.
to address the issue. So the KPIs are developed within the course
Makes sense.
and every one of them. So I would say there are 4 traits that a 21st century leader must have. I think the first one is they must understand and respect science, because if they don't do that and ignore it, now I'm not saying that every national leader and business leader on the planet has to be a scientist.
Yeah.
I'm only saying that they must at
Be open
least
to the idea.
be respectful of science, be embracing the knowledge that the scientists are giving us.
Right.
I'm not saying they need to be scientists. So that's the first trait of a 21st century leader. The second trait of a 21st century leader is they have an urgency to impact the climate emergency.
Right.
They are not going to come up with targets that are going to happen in 2050, 2060, 2070.
Yeah.
So for me, any leader on the planet, national or business leader, who commits to this kind of exiting fossil fuels and getting out of carbon emissions any day after 2025 or 2030 are basically fooling themselves.
Right.
Because they are giving a figure to quieten everyone down,
Right.
and sadly even the UN is accepting that.
Right.
So, I mean, if you have 2 reports which say we are going to be crossing 1.5 in the next 5 years, you are not going to allow anyone to come up with any commitments after that. But everyone is giving commitments after that. So, second is urgency to impact the climate emergency.
Right.
Third one is they need to embed the 21st century model into their corporate strategy. So, the 3 emergencies and the 3 disruptors, the 6 modules must be now embedded
Right.
in their corporate strategy or national strategy, and they need to make sure that the 21st century strategy is part and parcel of their corporate strategy.
Okay. Excellent.
Lastly, they must be people who now bring this into the board agenda, bring this into the leadership agenda, and drive the solutions with KPIs which are measured at a boardroom level, at a C-suite level, at a leadership level. And I believe that a 21st century leader is one who does these 4 things. And what we are trying to do is to accelerate leaders to do that. And this will also be something we do very intentionally in every country we run this program.
Right. It comes to my one question before the last question. Very briefly, we can really, this is about leadership measure. I think you have touched upon that as well. Technology has enabled us to get into the leadership, the sustainable space very easily. I mean, you can find decarbonized cities, solar forest, and all these Teslas, Neuralink, Starlink, all that. And of course, Google also come up with next thermostat, and then I think Elon Musk also come up, Tesla has come up with these power walls, all that. So there are so many options. So for a traditional, conventional corporate leader, what options to take? That is one question. And also, on the other hand, what sort of renewable energy that you want to go, whether it is solar, whether it is geothermal, or whether it is hydro, or ocean, or wind. So there are so many different options. How do you kind of, it can be, the matrices can be so much in terms of how to measure your leadership, but when you have so much of different options, Dr. Ravi, how do you provide direction, have some intelligence to move forward?
Excellent. So let me make a sweeping statement. No national leadership council, no board on any planet has all the knowledge you require to address the 21st century leadership challenges, the 6 modules.
Right.
However, you can bring that knowledge into the boardroom and into national strategy leadership by bringing an advisory cohort of people who can begin to advise you on the best options. So the first thing about 21st century leadership is that you acknowledge that you don't have the knowledge.
Right.
Because fooling yourself and telling yourself we can ignore the reality and continue is basically living in a fool's paradise.
Right. Okay.
So number one is bring the knowledge into the boardroom. You don't have to bring them permanently.
Right.
Bring them in on an advisory scale in terms of the problem. The number one issue the world needs to fix is the energy issue, because fixing everything else on the planet and not fixing the energy issue
Right.
means global warming, extreme weather and destruction of the planet will happen. So now to your
runs on that.
basically, we have a 35 years of running the world's economy on petroleum. Now this has to change. Now this has to change, like we have been talking about this must change from the Rio Earth Summit in 1992, where they said by 2000 we will exit fossil fuels. Then we come to 2000, we said we will, at Paris we said we are going to exit it in 2030. So suddenly the goalpost shifted 30 years, even though the crisis was hitting. Now in COP26 we said let's do it by 2050. I can tell you, anyone talking about 2050 has lost the plot completely.
Right.
So now, how do you make the right decision? Number one, populate your team, bring in the expertise that is needed to give you advice on the 6 modules.
Okay.
No company is going to have an energy expert
Right.
who is going to give you all the solutions within the board.
Okay.
Bring someone who understands this and get the
and be comfortable with your limitations.
limitations that you don't know
Know
this.
that.
Number two, health and social emergencies. How do you respond to the next COVID shutdown? Now we are talking about Omicron.
Yeah.
Well, now I can promise you in the next 6 to 8 months there will be another whatever.
As always.
And now how do we respond
How
to
we adapt to
future?
that, yes.
Why do you need to have offices? Why can't you work from home? Why can't you make that the norm? I mean, Unilever has said they are going to be working 3 days in office and 2 days at home. Every company I think should transform themselves so that they are able to do it. How do you manufacture? How do you bring in robotics to manufacture when you don't have all the people out there? So that is needed. So bring in the knowledge. Number two, you must then ensure that you measure the success and monitor the success with that knowledge that's coming in.
Right.
I want to spend a moment on energy because you have talked about energy. Sri Lanka, let's talk about Sri Lanka for a moment.
Okay.
Sri Lanka is one of those countries which have 360 days of sunlight. In Europe, most of the countries have probably 90 days of sunlight or maybe 100 days of sunlight, 3 to 4 months during summer. Most of those countries have now moved into 30 to 40% to 50% renewable energy. Sri Lanka with 360 days of sunlight is 1% of solar power at the moment. 29% is hydroelectricity.
Right.
Now why Sri Lanka hasn't accelerated the renewable energy of 1% to be now nearly 50% by now is only answered by talking to the CEB and asking them, why haven't we done that?
Right.
Has it anything to do with the fact that we are yet getting some cash from getting coal into Sri Lanka? I have no idea. But all I can say is the president has very clearly committed in COP26 and committed in
On paper.
committed to the world on paper that by 2030, which is 8 to 9 years from now, Sri Lanka will be 70% driven by renewable energy. Now, what are the options we have?
Right.
Number one, to me, solar power plus batteries is a no-brainer.
Right.
Solar on its own is not going to work, batteries on its own is not going to work. It's a solar battery combination.
Right.
Get the solar, capture it, store it in the batteries, use it. And these are
solar city and all that is
exactly, I mean today South Australia is a 100% renewable energy run state in a country where its leader has said there is no climate change. How is that possible? Because you have a 21st century leader running South Australia.
Right, okay.
And they have solar plus battery. There was a company in Denmark called the Danish Oil and Gas Company. This company hired a new CEO called Henrik Paulsen in 2009. You know what he said? I'm going to convert this company to a renewable energy company. Fast forward to 2019, He transformed Danish oil and gas, which was 85% of Denmark's oil and gas industry, to be now the world leader in wind power with a company called Ørsted.
Yeah, Ørsted.
So what is unique about him is he's a 21st century leader.
Excellent. This comes to my last question, which I ask all my guests. When it comes to C4 leadership attributes, there are 4 C's that are identified. One is the consciousness, which is about your own beliefs, your ethics, your value systems, how we're wired basically, and also the culture, the role of culture playing in driving an organization, performance-driven organization, and also the ability to connect with people, not just communication, but to connect with a highly diversified labor force with different new ideas, new value systems cropping up, and also the usual competencies of a leader in traditional sense of creativity, innovation, planning, all that. Dr. Ravi, what do you think in your experience, you can relate to the sustainable model as well, is the most important kind of C4, the C that you would think that would drive performance-driven organization in the future?
Excellent. I think that's a very good question, because I think a 21st century leader will not begin to walk the journey of a 21st century leader if he has no consciousness about the reality of the world. To me, consciousness is a no-brainer, because the reason we have a problem is because 99.9% of world leaders and national leaders have no consciousness about what is happening with the code red for humanity.
Right.
So you can't even begin to move forward without a consciousness.
Right.
But if you are conscious and then leaving that consciousness to yourself, then you have achieved nothing.
Okay.
You need to now convert that consciousness to a conscious effort to fight the code red for business.
Excellent.
Or code red for humanity.
Right.
So the second one you talked about was turn that into a cultural awareness.
Basically culture.
Culture.
Yeah.
You need to then, in every country, in every business, in every nation that you run, understand what is the prevalent culture.
Right.
And then how do you trigger urgency to impact the climate emergency in terms of converting the consciousness that you have now acquired to being science-led, to turn the culture around in the company to be respondent and be part of the solution.
Right.
The third area was communicate.
Connect.
How do you now connect with your company's teams to ensure that they are able to see this as a reward giving strategy? Now, one of the problems in most companies is they do not reward and remunerate those people who are driving the solution to the code red for humanity. If you want to connect with people, you must reward people.
Absolutely.
And you can't basically say, I will measure your success on have you delivered the gross margin, have you delivered on the numerical numbers of revenue targets, and then say, what did you do about sustainability? No chance.
Absolutely.
That is not going to happen. These have to be, to connect, you need to translate the 6 modules I talked about into KPIs that are rewarded, measured, and respected in the company and rewarded. The last one was communicate.
The company's usual leadership planning convention.
Yeah.
That's basically.
Okay, so I think the last one is competence. Now, one of the things that I would urge anyone looking at this session today to think about is ask yourself the question, are you a competent 21st century leader or not? So you need to be able to first look yourself in the mirror and ask the question, am I a 21st century ready leader, or am I a 19th century science-led, science-denying leader who denies the existence of a code red for humanity and denies the word extreme weather incidents? Or am I only thinking about shareholder profits and have I forgotten about everything else? So you need to first look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself the question. If your answer to that question is yes, that is where I am today, then the first thing is you owe it
Right.
to the company you're working with, to the nation you're leading, or the organization you're leading, to be now a 21st century competent, science-led, triple bottom line mindset leader.
Excellent.
If you don't do that, you are going to be absolutely ruining the country, ruining the planet, and ruining your business all in the same place. And Brazil is a classic example of where that has happened.
Yeah.
Here was a leader who denied science, and it's the second highest number of COVID deaths on the planet.
The
Here's
science
a-
have caught up.
The science caught up. Number two, here's a country which devastated more of the Amazon rainforest than has ever happened during his leadership. Today, Brazil is a net zero. It used to be 20% of the world's oxygen, is 0%. So you will become a absolute chaos to your nation and the business if you are a 19th century leader.
Dr. Ravi, it has been a pleasure coming on this program.
Nice to meet you, Manik, after some time.
Thank you for sharing your insight. I'm sure all what we discussed today would have helped you gain immense knowledge how you view leadership today, especially 21st century leadership. The missing link, the missing piece of sustainable leadership is an amazing imperative tool that you need to have in your leadership arsenal. You need to really acknowledge first and then understand the whole philosophy and the concept of sustainable leadership. And then to figure out how it can relate to today's disruptive and various other challenges. I would like to call these code red leadership competencies which you need to incorporate if you are going to move forward as 21st century leader. So thank you very much, Dr. Ravi, and till we meet again with another edition of Leadership Perspectives. Thank you for watching. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you.